the sanctuary of Lourdes in the Hautes-Pyrénées. This is one of the most popular Catholic pilgrimage sites in the world. It welcomes over 6 million visitors every year, including 60,000 sick and disabled. It's bigger than the Vatican, and it has the largest basilica in the world that can accommodate nearly 25,000 people under its roof. Why? Because over 160 years ago, Lourdes became the city of miracles, a place where the sick were healed, the incurable cured.
We observed spontaneous regression of advanced stage cancers, and it's not clear why.
How can the healing be explained? Who received the miracles of Lourdes? And what exactly happens here?
My illness was almost immediately healed. It's hard to believe. I thought, am I dreaming?
These spontaneous cures are officially recognized as miracles by the Vatican. So far, it has recognized 69 of them. Lourdes has been busy for 160 years. Crowds of people flock here, and the sanctuary is forced to expand. It is said that the Vatican needs miracles. When they happen, the number of pilgrims here rises.
The Church wants to use it as one would a sign, so it wants people to have as much evidence as possible.
How is a miracle authenticated? And why does it take so long for one to be recognized?
Because it obviously opens the door to a proliferation of deceits and to people who make money from such superstitions.
Of the 7,000 files that were put forward, only 69, which is very, very few, were accepted.
Lourdes is like nowhere else in the world. Here, doctors, unconnected to the Catholic Church, study the cases of spontaneous cures. But why entrust the task of proving a miracle to science?
These people, who know how organs normally work, see that here we are talking about something special.
Science is progressing every day. A miracle which has been recognized as such in the past can now be explained. But medicine does not diminish the number of miracles. How is this possible?
It could be said that the brain, which acts on our immune system, can modulate the phases of the disease, or even potentially cure it. It is theoretically possible.
What has happened since February 11, 1858, the year the destiny of Lourdes changed forever, when a 14-year-old girl, Bernadette Soubirous, saw the Virgin Mary and discovered her spring in the grotto of Massabielle, the source of most of the healings. We will reveal everything you need to know about this sanctuary and unveil its 160-year history. We will unlock the secrets of the miracles of Lourdes.
The miracle is always there. One can be an atheist and still believe in miracles.
To discover how a miracle happens, we must first understand how they are recognized. Over the last 160 years, there have been about 7,300 so-called spontaneous cures. Of these cures, 69 have been named miracles. On June 20th, 2013, the 69th miracle of Lourdes was recognized by the Catholic Church. An Italian, Daniela Castelli, was cured of heart disease. The actual healing took place 24 years earlier. Another miracle was recognized by the Church in 2012, only after a 47-year investigation. It centered around an Italian nun with paralyzed legs who in 1965 suddenly got up from her wheelchair and walked. 24 years, 47 years. Why does it take so long for a miracle to be proclaimed?
It's so we can convey the truth of the facts.
Alessandro De Franciscis is a doctor. For the past 8 years, he has headed up the Bureau of Medical Findings. This is the bureau which verifies the miracles. He is the first step in a very long journey. But why does the investigation to find the truth take so long?
Because it obviously opens the door to a proliferation of deceits, people who make money on the superstitions of such things.
There is an extremely strict procedure. We want to avoid discredit, and that's why out of the 7,000 files that were handed to us, only 69, that's very, very few, ended up reaching the end of the procedure and being recognized as miracles.
In Lourdes, it is not the church that investigates. It's the medical profession. As incredible as it may seem, the Vatican and the dioceses that represent the Church in France never participate in the investigations.
It was a brilliant intuition that Lourdes had in France, unlike any other place of pilgrimage across all religions worldwide, to entrust the study and precise in-depth validation to the medical world and not to ministers of the Church.
Medicine and science are as important here as anywhere in the world. Miraculous cures are studied, examined, and either proven or disproven by doctors. Their task is very difficult. As scientists, they need to find reasons and explanations for the cure. They must exclude all other possibilities until they find themselves with no other explanation. It's at this precise moment that a miracle is declared. The validation of a miraculous healing is therefore a very long process. Several steps must be taken by the person claiming to have been healed. When a person thinks they have been cured, they must first declare their claims at the Bureau of Medical Observations of Lourdes.
First of all, it's necessary to investigate the person. Was the person really sick?
The disease must be a well-known disease with a description, confirmed and with an unfavorable prognosis. Not necessarily terminal, but unfavorable.
If the doctor finds that a good case, they start a file and ask the person to come back with their full medical history, but not before they have waited a full year.
I need everything. Copies of diagnosis, copies of medical reports and specialist consultations, pathological anatomy biopsies, MRI scans, everything one needs. We begin to build a medical file. This is where we start. It's a rather hard job asking people to collaborate with us. At every step, there are a huge number of question marks.
What you need to be sure of is that the person has not been treated for this disease and that the treatment has, in the end, been effective. It can happen that a person is sick and is given treatment. The treatment takes time to act, then the treatment has finally worked and the person is cured. They think that they were cured miraculously. However, in fact, it was simply as a consequence of medical treatment. Another aspect to consider is that someone may think they have been cured and in fact the symptoms may have disappeared. However, it may be a temporary remission. We know that it is unfortunately the case for cancer patients, for example.
One criteria for the confirmation of healing is that the cure must be permanent.
For us, a cure must have 4 characteristics or criteria. Firstly, it's a healing that arrives without any warning sign. Secondly, a healing must happen instantly. Thirdly, it must be a complete and total cure. And finally, the healing should last forever.
A cure which is sudden, instant, complete, and lasting. That is why a year must go by before the claimant's case can be heard.
It's at this moment, when I have all the necessary material, that I, as all my predecessors, hold a meeting called, in the Lourdes jargon, the Findings Bureau.
All the doctors, pharmacists, dentists, nurses, and surgeons who are present in Lourdes that day are invited to meet in the presence of the person concerned.
We are going to call in a whole bunch of doctors and request the opinion of several doctors asking, do you think that there can be scientific or natural explanations? Or is this going beyond what's natural? Are we in the supernatural?
All the specialists still meet in the same place to discuss the various medical cases.
We are at the entrance of the conference room of the Bureau of Medical Findings. This is a room that I use throughout the year to discuss supposed cases of healing. The person or persons who have supposedly been healed enter the room and we discuss their case.
The session opens. The doctors chosen by the Bureau can ask any questions they wish and discuss among themselves the strength of the diagnosis and the known evolution of this disease.
The person who is supposed to have been cured usually sits in the front row, so that after they present their medical file, the doctors can question them about their symptoms.
This first phase, which can last several years, allows us to examine the cure and its robustness.
We are going to look for different explanations, even in the absence of medical treatment, by saying yes, but maybe other factors could explain the cure. In a way, we look for all possible and imaginable explanations.
These meetings happen year after year until all the questions have been asked and nothing remains unanswered. That's when the last meeting happens.
We can arrive in a collective session. We vote by raising our hand if we have managed to identify a cure. We can say, this is an unexplained healing in the current state of our medical and scientific knowledge.
At the end of these meetings, the Medical Bureau sends the file to the International Medical Committee of Lourdes. This committee is made up of 30 medical professionals, each eminent in their specialism. They are responsible for praising and eventually confirming the cure.
These people are at the forefront of research in their field. And of course, the fact that they can talk to each other allows us to give this, the study of an astonishing sign, a particular depth. These people who know how organs normally work see that here there is something special.
This committee meets only once a year in absolute secrecy. The committee appoints one of its members to examine the file in greater depth. This key doctor can consult whomever he wants. They make use of everything that has been published on the subject. They may submit documents from the file to colleagues to collect their assessments. They can do whatever they want, for as long as they want.
On the one hand, it's necessary. We also need to know, while taking the necessary precautions, that there are things in all areas that can be recognized in the spiritual domain, the psychic domain, and the physical domain as well.
The committee can go into more or less detail in its conclusions. If there is still uncertainty about the diagnosis, it can be satisfied by confirming that, yes, this person was ill for years and today they are well. This sudden change is linked to Lourdes. The International Medical Committee of Lourdes can also certify that this healing remains unexplained, but approval must receive 2/3 of the votes.
Doctors will simply end up saying, in this case, we consider that the healing cannot be explained within the current context of science. It is the Church that uses the term miracle.
The final step is the official statement. Is this a miracle?
We have a declaration of healing. The cure is confirmed by the International Medical Committee of Lourdes, and here the medical expertise is completed. I think we need to convey the truth of the facts. These are that in Lourdes, if we say that someone is cured, I assure you, they were sick, they have undoubtedly been cured, and this cure has, of today, no explanation.
The last word comes back to the Church. It decides whether this healing will be publicly recognized or not. The strongest commitment is the recognition of a miracle. This process of authentication by the Church takes place in parallel to the scientific inquiry. The Church looks at the person, observes their behavior and their way of life following the healing.
We try to see if what they have lived in Lourdes finally reveals a spiritual path in their own existence, and if this spiritual path is one that is also open for others. But if, on the other hand, we see that they try to benefit from it, for example, financially, if they get paid to tell their story, or if there are things that make it sound false, it would remain just a prodigious event, an unexplained cure, and we would not recognize it as a miracle.
Today, the procedure is becoming increasingly complex. How could it be any different when medical science is advancing so rapidly? It has the advantage of establishing degrees of affirmation. It makes it possible to decide, miracle or illusion. Degrees of affirmation exist because degrees of certainty do too. This is the price we have to pay to keep Lourdes credible in the eyes of the faithful and the world. Today, millions of people come to drink from the spring of Lourdes, to bathe, to touch the walls of the Massabielle cave, to recover, to heal. Yet, there have been only 69 miracles recognized in the whole history of Lourdes. Why has this place got the reputation it has? Let's travel to the Massabielle grotto, where it all started 160 years ago, when Lourdes was just a small village lost in the Pyrenean Valley. In order to understand the vital role medicine plays in the validation of miracles, we need to know the facts of Lourdes. How did everything start? The person who started it all was a 14-year-old girl, Bernadette Marie Soubirous. It is through her that Lourdes became a world-renowned sanctuary. Bernadette was born in Lourdes on January 7, 1844, at the Moulin de Boilly. She suffered constant misery and chronic asthma. Nothing in her short life could have predicted that she would change the face of the Catholic world forever. It is February 11th, 1858.
It's winter and it's cold. No work, no food. The mother asks Toinette, Bernadette's little sister, to go and fetch some wood.
Bernadette and a friend accompany Toinette to the edge of the Massabielle cave, the cave that has served as the foundation of the current sanctuary. Toinette and their friend cross the river barefoot. It is here, on this day, that everything will turn around for Bernadette and for the village of Lourdes.
The girls wave to Bernadette to join them, but she's a little scared. And then she hears a noise, like wind. She turns around and sees in this cave a light.
In the hollow of the cave, a beautiful lady appears to her for the first time.
It is here that she sees an apparition of a radiant girl dressed in white. She does not speak, she beckons to her to come closer and then makes the sign of the cross.
She thinks she's dreaming. She says, "The more I rubbed my eyes, the more I saw this lady smiling at me."
In the small village, the rumors spread quickly. The people want to see the girl who has had the apparitions.
There are people who are immediately very interested. For the following appearances, there will be a crowd. A lot of people who are really fascinated by the vision and who believe in it. And then, at the same time, there are very skeptical people who do not believe it at all and try to discredit it.
The apparitions soon multiply and miraculous cures begin to occur. At Bernadette's 9th apparition on Thursday, February 25, 1858, the lady said, "Go and drink from the fountain and wash yourself there." So Bernadette makes a hole in the grass where she is. Incredibly, from this hole, a spring appears. This spring remains at the heart of most miracles.
She stops at the bottom of the cave. She puts her face on the floor. She starts scratching. She continues. That's where she has a little bit of muddy water. It starts to become pure, and she'll be able to drink.
The miraculous spring of Lourdes had been discovered. Even today, it is from this source that Lourdes water flows. It is in this water that the sick bathe. During the 16th apparition on Thursday, March 25th, Bernadette asks the lady her name. She answers, "Que soy era l'Immaculada Concepción." I am the Immaculate Conception. It is this short phrase that definitely seals the fate of Lourdes and of the young teenage girl.
I am the Immaculate Conception. But from where does she know this expression?
I am the Immaculate Conception is incomprehensible. I was conceived without sin, but I'm not my conception means nothing to Bernadette. That's what we've been looking for a long time. But let's be clear that she said something that she didn't understand.
Bernadette doesn't know these words. She repeats the sentence she heard to Father Paramal, her village priest.
He fell to his knees in tears. He understood. He saw through Bernadette's face something resembling the Blessed Virgin.
The Immaculate Conception is, at this time, a new belief in the Catholic religion. Bernadette does not understand the expression.
This belief is quite young as it dates from 1854. It's an expression which was not very well known at the time.
Immediately, the church decides to act. In 1860, Father Paramal takes Bernadette to Nevers, 700 kilometers from Lourdes. She is to become a boarder in a hospice. He arranges for the Soubirous family to stay in Lourdes, relocating them for free. In 1861, the Bishop of Tarbes bought the cave from the commune of Lourdes. The Vatican had the cave fitted out and began the construction of a basilica. Finally, the church officially recognized that this place is a source of miracles. The reputation of Lourdes goes from myth to fact. Lourdes will never be the same again. Unfortunately, neither was Bernadette. She became an international celebrity, but she could not stand the attention she received. Her situation became more and more intolerable.
Until her death, she'll have to testify, which for her will be an ordeal, especially because of her asthma and difficulty speaking.
At 22 years old, Bernadette entered a convent. On April 16, 1879, she died from lung disease. She was 35 years old. For the next 160 years, the sanctuary of Lourdes continued to attract millions of visitors, the inquisitive, the sick, and the faithful. But why do they keep coming? First, because people were being healed. 7,300 unexplained cures have been recorded. 7,300 lives affected by Lourdes when no one could do anything for them. Furthermore, because many of these cures are verified by medicine, it seems that the sanctuary of Lourdes is the origin of these healings. This authentication of miracles is almost more important than the announcements of the cures themselves. This is the proof that gives credibility to the sanctuary. And these verifications started as early as 1858, the same year that Bernadette saw the Virgin Mary. Almost immediately after the discovery of the spring in the Massabielle cave, dozens said they were cured of their disease or disability.
Right away, we had to ask ourselves, is it true? So the first step is for those doctors present to verify that something has happened. We verify, first of all, as we are concerned that we are not faced by a manipulation or an illusion.
In the 1850s, it was necessary for Monseigneur Lawrence, the Bishop of Tarbes, to disentangle the truth from the lies. At the end of July 1858, Monseigneur Lawrence sets up the first medical commission to begin analyzing the claims. The commission was headed up by Professor Vergès, an associate professor of thermal medicine at the Faculté of Montpellier. He spent all his summers in the region. Professor Vergès meets everyone who claims to have been healed. He questions and examines them. He then reports his findings back to the bishop.
Especially when the cures really multiplied in 72 and 73. And not only with the cave water, but also with the procession of the Holy Sacrament.
Those healed are not necessarily miraculously cured. Only the Vatican and the Church can interpret healings as miracles. The first recorded miracle in the history of Lourdes was Catherine Latapie, a 38-year-old mother living in Loubajac, a village 6 kilometers from Lourdes. She had 4 children. 2 had died young, but she was now pregnant again. Catherine had a major handicap. She could no longer use her right arm. In the night, she woke and a force pushed her to go to the Massabielle cave. She did not hesitate. She woke her 2 children and left on foot. Once there, she discovered the spring, which was little more than a trickle of water. She puts her hand into the water and suddenly regains its complete use. How did we know this? Because Catherine gave birth to her son that night. The official date on this first miracle was Monday, March 1st, 1858, just days after Bernadette dug the earth to discover the source of water. The second miracle happened soon afterwards. It caused a big stir because Louis Bourriette, a man from Lourdes, loudly proclaimed his recovery. 20 years before, dynamite exploded in a quarry and splinters entered Louis' eye, leaving him blind in one eye. Louis was brought to Lourdes by his sister. Although a disbeliever, he puts the water on his blind eye and immediately regains his sight. These and 5 other cases remain unexplained. The bishop called them miraculously healed. These healings are miracles. I can see God's finger in them. To authenticate them, he relied on a doctor's examination.
Indeed, 7 of the dozen cures which had already occurred were recognized with the help of Dr. Vergès from Montpellier, therefore enabling these first 7 cures of Lourdes to be counted.
Certainly, in the first place, it was to sort out all the declarations, but it was the first step in a new way of seeing the miracles for the Church. Straight after the apparitions of Bernadette, science intervened. It is this same medical and scientific involvement that has contributed to the international renown of Lourdes. This is also the first time in the history of the apparitions of the Virgin Mary that science has been so involved.
There have always been apparitions since the beginning of the Church. However, there never had been a need for certificates of authenticity.
If we look at the majority of Marian apparitions in the world throughout history, we can see that the messages that the Virgin gave to this or that person were listened to by the relatives of the witnesses. The miracles were just announced, never scientifically verified. The scope of these phenomena was not global as it is in Lourdes. How did Bernadette's apparitions and the miracles that happened at Lourdes became so popular? Firstly, consider the time and place. France, in the middle of the 19th century. It is the Industrial Revolution, an era when anti-clericalism was very strong, a time when everything had to be explained scientifically.
It's a phenomenon that takes place in the century of science, this positivist context in which science always seemed to have the last word.
From the moment that science took the spotlight, we wanted to use scientific methods too, but in fact, they just follow common sense. It's about verifying that it's not something we're causing, but something that unexpectedly testifies that heaven is present on earth and hasn't abandoned us.
So, be it an apparition or a miracle, science and even the church are perplexed in the general climate.
We're afraid of charlatans. Someone comes to you saying, I was healed miraculously. What do you do? Should you believe them or not? There are recurrent problems in the history of Christianity. Here we can go back again to the very beginning, to the Bible.
Of the 69 people who officially received a miracle, 55 were from France, 8 from Italy, 3 from Belgium, and 1 from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. The youngest is 2 years old and the oldest is 64. More than 70% are under 40 years old. But beyond these 69 miracles, Healings has made Lourdes a unique place. The last two were the Frenchman Serge François and the Italian Daniela Castelli. Serge François led a very active life with his wife and their 3 children. On May 10, 1997, he suddenly fell ill with back problems. After a series of examinations, he underwent surgery on his spine.
I had surgery from a herniated disc. As a result of this operation, I had a huge epidural hematoma. This caused partial paralysis of my left leg.
From then on, Serge's life is punctuated by painful and inefficient treatment. On Friday, April 12, 2002, Serge decided to go to Lourdes to receive the anointing of the sick. In the evening, he attended the torchlight procession from his hotel.
At the end of the celebration, I had a sudden urge to go to the cave.
At about 11 p.m., Serge was sitting in almost the same place as Bernadette once prayed. Without knowing why, Serge advanced towards the trickle of water flowing from the bottom of the rock behind the collection box. He soaked the tips of his fingers in it. Then he went to the fountains, drank some water, and washed his face.
At that moment, I was caught in a whirlwind. I had a pain that went from my lower back down my whole leg. After about a minute, everything is back to normal, and I had a feeling of well-being, comfort and warmth. My leg, which was always cold, icy and sclerotic, had become hot. I wondered what was happening to me.
About 10 days later, back at home, a deformation that had formed under his foot disappeared. The church recognized Serge's healing as remarkable, but so far it is not considered miraculous. Why? Let's look at Italian Daniela Castelli's healing, the 69th and last miracle of Lourdes to date. Daniela suffered from high blood pressure that manifested itself as acute and frequent attacks. On May 4, 1989, Daniela was 43 years old. Exhausted after 7 years of treatment and surgery, her husband decided to take her to Lourdes before going to see specialists in the United States. Daniela was very weak and convinced that this was the last trip of her life. After being bathed in the pools of the sanctuary, she felt an inexplicable well-being and suddenly was healed. After a process of several decades, the final and lasting cure of Daniela was unanimously verified. The syndrome she had suffered from for 21 years disappeared almost instantly with no scientific explanation.
My illness was almost immediately healed. It's hard to believe. I thought, am I dreaming?
In 2011, another international scientific commission tasked with evaluating the diagnosis confirmed the miracle. But why Daniela and not Serge François? Because in the end, only one organization can separate miracles from spontaneous healings. Only one group can declare a miracle: the Catholic Church. Officially, a miracle is a divine sign, but in fact, the Church seems to choose who has the right to be miraculously healed. It even seems to declare miracles at key moments in its personal history. What is the true position of the Church in the 21st century? The Vatican intervenes only at the end of the process of validating the miracles of Lourdes. Are these signs too heavy to bear? In 1858, after the apparitions of Bernadette Soubirous, everyone, both religious and non-religious, wanted to take over. The French state, seeing the popularity of Lourdes, became interested in those responsible for this excitement, including young Bernadette and the patients who were suddenly cured.
It should be known that in the 19th century, we stand before the separation of church and state. It is the law of 1905, and so very early on, the public authorities take interest. Investigations start. We really have the police and the investigators, the inspectors, who are going to meddle in the case, who will question the witnesses and the people who claim to have been miraculously cured.
In France, at the time of the Industrial Revolution and of great scientific discovery, a wave of opinion violently attacked religion. At the head of this movement was Émile Zola, who shortly after publishing Germinal ignited a new fire entitled Lourdes, which aimed to demystify the wonders witnessed by pilgrims. When man has touched the depth of the misfortune of life, he wrote, he returns to the divine illusion. This view took on disturbing proportions. Priests were persecuted and Christians mistreated because of their beliefs.
Lourdes was born in the middle of an age when man is trapped in a factory, trapped in a world that becomes a concentration camp. However, man is not a mechanism.
The Church had to react. When the events of Lourdes occurred, the Vatican seized the opportunity to win back the hearts of the French people.
Religion itself must remain open. It cannot lock itself away. There is always the temptation in something that could be a fixed theory, which could be a set code, which could finally be an ideology. Religion must connect man to what is beyond him.
By giving maximum voice to apparitions and miraculous cures, the Church wanted to prove that God does not abandon France's Christians. The Vatican goes even further. It gets the Bishop of Tarbes to buy the Massabielle cave and the surrounding grounds. During this first year, it officially recognized 7 miracles and many healings. But science and scientific theory were very strong, so the clergy had an idea that changed everything. If miracles were to be recognized, they had to be scientifically verified. It worked, because in 160 years, the number of pilgrims has never slowed down. Lourdes became, in less than a century, the world capital of miraculous healing, constantly building new churches, chapels, and basilicas. Even if words and postures change and evolve, The Catholic Church does not attempt to deny miraculous cures. Medical expertise is therefore a first, necessary step to avoid being abused by fraudulent claims. But beyond the doctors present in Lourdes, science has tried to understand and rationalize healings. If we had to study everything, medicine would no doubt remove the miraculous nature of many people healed. Is science not the enemy of the miracle? It is science that changed everything in Lourdes. Without wishing to control everything scientifically, Bernadette's apparitions would not have had as great an impact. Without science verifying the authenticity of healing, no miracles would have been recognized. This is the paradox of the sanctuary of Lourdes. Can science explain everything?
We must remain cautious. Our knowledge of the human body is limited. Scientific progress is real, constant, and at the same time, the more you learn, the more you are limited. From a scientific point of view, we must adopt a slower, humbler attitude, and simultaneously, we must recognize that we are dealing with a phenomenon that go far beyond what we are able to explain.
But finally, could a miracle be a temporary inability to explain a cure? With a century and a half of insight and scientific progress, what is it that remains inexplicable today?
We observe fewer and fewer miracles. Why? Because we're taken care of earlier. That's certainly true that for there to be a miracle, no treatment may have taken place. So it's obviously more and more rare and more difficult to observe them.
Can faith put our pain, our difficulties, or even our illness to rest? Is our brain able to solve everything?
Today, we increasingly know that the brain has an impact on our state of health. The brain can modify the microbiota. That is to say, the bacterial content of our intestine influences our heart rate, our blood pressure. The brain influences our immune system. So when we're depressed, our immune system is much weaker and we'll catch infections more easily. We have more and more clear proof of this.
This leads to one question. Are the miracles of yesterday still miracles today? Some diseases that were once incurable are no longer. We realize that the evolution of the diseases of those miraculously cured is closely linked to medical progress. The first historical cases concerned infectious diseases, in particular tuberculosis.
There may be cures here, albeit currently unexplained. However, then we will find explanations. For example, tuberculosis that was healed in an unexplained miraculous way here, when penicillin had not yet been discovered. And little by little, doctors cured tuberculosis.
Then Lourdes welcomed patients with rheumatism. This is soon followed by those with cancer, still very numerous today.
Only 40 years ago, a cancer patient would certainly die. Today, the possibility of successfully treating is over 50%. Those are the victories of the scientific method.
Since the 50s, the diseases that are present in Lourdes are no longer linked to bacteria or viruses, to external elements. Today, it's the diseases that start inside us, autoimmune diseases, which are more common.
There are more and more chronic diseases where one produces antibodies against one's own body. So yes, there is a genetic terrain, but these diseases still remain mysteries.
If the body, via the brain, creates these diseases, it is also able to cure them or to reduce their spread. This desire, which triggers its own healing, is it not faith? According to the various religions, faith can move mountains. And collective faith can do even more. Anyone traveling to Lourdes will tell you. There's such fervor there, thousands of people communicating together. One is literally embodied by this faith. We can easily imagine that this communion has a major influence.
From the moment that there is a crowd, from the moment there is adhesion to a common value, there can be a phenomenon of collected identification and mimicry. We forget the individuality. We get together. We form a unity. And suddenly, the link can be a common improvement, a phenomenon strong enough to remove some
Un phénomène
symptoms.
suffisamment fort pour lever certains symptômes.
We know from hypnosis that we can relieve certain symptoms, but not necessarily always in the long term. It can be something very temporary if the real crux of the problem has not been solved.
The brain is therefore influenced by external conditions, and some believe that it is even our emotional center that makes us sick or heals us. The proof of this is that the proportion of women to men who have been miraculously cured in Lourdes. 80% are women and 20% men.
It's amazing. How do you explain it? Do women have more faith than men? Finally, is the emotional impact on women stronger than on men? What we observe, in any case, is that in adolescence, what we call the psychosomatic disease, that is, physical disorders related to emotional problems, are roughly in the ratio of 80-20. Boys' troubles in adolescence are much more related to the current moment and action or hyperactivity. This is how it's explained. Psychosomatic disorders are much more common in girls, and so we can heal them.
The scientific explanation of miracles therefore passes through the brain. It is the brain which controls, so it is also the brain which heals. Are willpower and faith masters of our body? Is it really that simple?
The brain has great power over our body. Now we do not control our brain either. It's not just willpower. These things we do not control. Depending on one's emotional state, again, one's immune system may vary. Even, for example, the healing time after cutting oneself. However, we should not rely solely on this leading us to treat only by a somatic psychotherapeutic approach. Even if the brain can intervene, it needs help.
The miracle may be inside too, for many people who are in a dramatic situation, who are in a deep depression, and who, through prayer and faith, find meaning in their lives, an answer to their existential questions, and get back up again. Well, I think that it can, in a way, but just as miraculously and just as spectacular. From this point of view, faith still has its place, religion still has its place, the miracle still has its place in today's society.
Le miracle a encore sa place dans notre société aujourd'hui.
Science does not explain everything. Further proof was the scientific analysis of the water from the spring that flows from the Massabielle cave. It has supposedly cured so many people, nearly 2/3 of the 7,300 spontaneous healings. Yet, the analysis did not reveal anything abnormal. The water was ordinary, even if it can work miracles. Here again, Lourdes is a unique case in Christendom. By combining science and religion, everyone can find their place. Science is capable of explaining a past miracle, but perhaps the cures were assigned to the scientific community saying, look, we can cure this disease. Now work to cure all the others with the same disease.
There are obviously some leads. That is to say that some will talk about the memory of water. Others will talk about the phenomenon of epigenetics, self-healing. We probe into some living organisms which are able to heal themselves, to regenerate themselves, to make some of their members grow again, to prolong their lives. It is therefore possible that in the decades to follow we can make scientific progress that can explain things that today remain unexplained.
Is it worthwhile today to try explaining the miracles of Lourdes?
From a pragmatic point of view, this is perhaps what we must remember. We must say to ourselves, there are people who are sick, there are people who are not well, and who are then healed. Well, that's already very good news.
Many say that the more science advances, the more the number of miracles will decline. For example, in Lourdes, there have been fewer miracles than previously, while in other churches, such as evangelical churches, everything is considered a miracle. A birth is a miracle. Anything that pleases us, anything that is unexpected, anything that is surprising is considered miraculous. The miracle is there at every moment. To be alive is miraculous. So the more science advances, the more miracles there will be, because science is miraculous. One can be an atheist and still believe in the miracles of science.
There will always be unexplained events. It is our destiny to advance towards the unknown.
Is the fate of science to explain the inexplicable today? Yes, but not only that. Because every time we explain something scientifically, we open a new door. And in the end, it's almost infinite, probably like the universe.
We must rise, see these cures and miracles differently. Of course, many of them can be explained today. But it only takes one case for faith to be present, for a message to exist. What is this message?
The great miracle of Lourdes is not healing. The great miracle of Lourdes is called acceptance. A whole host of people were unsuccessful, were not granted their wish, but received something else. Acceptance. They will live to the end of their lives with their illness, but in this new context of acceptance will enter a completely new way of life. This is the great miracle of Lourdes.
This is the message of miracles, the message of Lourdes, the value of the sanctuary of Lourdes, even for the Vatican. For the first time, there is a sanctuary that never empties, a sacred place that carries the messages of the Church without almost any intervention from the Holy See. Lourdes should remain the capital of miracles for a very long time.